All right. So this is still rough. I just dropped the footage in. This is what our next assignment is going to be, or one of our next assignments is going to be. Part of it, at least. So she's typing. We will replace the screen as well. It's the same outfit. Isn't that funny? And then there's a hologram. And it makes it go away. Sweet. And that's like perfect timing too for when you turned away and it went away. See, that's perfect acting. That is wonderful. All right. Now, what's cool about that is that whole setup of the hammer spinning around. That's very portable. So I could basically move that anywhere on my screen. So if I would have moved the camera over this way or moved the camera over that way, it's not a huge deal to move that that piece of artwork around. But all of that is created. The only thing that I'm giving you is going to be the piece of footage and then the hammer here. I'll give you those two things. Everything else you're going to create. So let's get started in showing that. So as always, we go to our 1900 folder, we go to our template, we copy it, we make a, rename it to hologram. You can record your own footage too if you want to put yourself in there or whatever, we can record it at the back. Sweet. So I'm just going to open this up. And initially, you're just going to ignore the piece of footage. Okay, so don't worry about. I opened up 2018 After Effects because 2018 After Effects is now available, and I downloaded it because I wanted to already play with it. There we go. All right, let's open this. Cool. All right, so don't worry about the piece of footage right now. What we need to worry about is getting the effect of the glowing thing. Everything else is pretty simple after that, okay? So I'm going to go to make a new comp. All of our comps at this point are still 960 by 540. The length of this, put it at a minute. It's plenty of time. We can shrink it, enlarge it, whatever. By now you already know that. Hologram. We'll call this hologram. I'll drop it into my comps. Okay. So this effect is going to use plugins that you do not have at home. Now, if you download the plugins, you can use them at your house for 14 days unlimited. What am I looking for? Red Giant download. So if you go to Red Giant, this is where they have their installers. We're going to be using the Trapcode suite. Okay, so that's what you can download. Even after the 14 days, you can still use it and you'll get an X. And then when you bring it to the school to render it out, it'll show you the stuff without the X. Okay, so I actually did this project at home without the plugin. And so when I come here, I have the plugin. So it's not a huge deal. You can still work. Everything is fine. Cool. So we need to have an area that we are going to project from, like the little hologram part. So I make a solid. Doesn't matter what color right now. We can, again, always change it. Shine hollow. Okay. So I need to make a shape. So you can use the pen tool. You can use the ellipse tool, whichever one you want to use. And I'm just going to basically do something like that. Okay. Now, if we actually had like a piece of geometry that was the hologram, like, I don't think I showed it in this class because it wasn't done yet, but in my other class we printed a little base for a HoloLens type thing, or holocron thing. So I could use that over there and size it up exactly, like match it. Perfect. Okay, so I have this, and then I'm going to go to Effects. I'm going to go to RG Trapcode and go to Shine. These are all the effects that Trapcode has, and these are pretty much around here industry standard. Most companies use them, all of them don't. Everything that I'm showing too, you could do other ways, but this is the way we're doing this one. All right, so the way that Shine works is there's a mask here, and then there's this center point, and what's happening is it's like a hole, it's shining light through that hole, okay? So if I take this and move this around, it moves where that light is shining from. So if this is a hologram, I probably want this to be shining like this, right? So it's from below shining upwards. And then the further down I go, you can see the narrower it's going to get. The closer I get to this, the bigger it's going to get. Okay, so something like that. I also want to go to my ray length, and I can control how far this comes off of there. Okay, so that's basically the distance or the height of this stuff here. And then there's a boost light, which will crank up the light intensity right there. Now we will hit this issue if we go too far. Do you see that banding there? Okay. What happens is we're boosting the light so much that the computer literally cannot calculate all those values, so it just says forget it, and it doesn't, and it just calculates that. Okay. Now if we go back to our project, down here it says 8 BPC. That's basically 8-bit is how many colors we have. Does anyone remember how many colors there is in an 8-bit color? 16 million. Okay, 16 million different colors. So the further up we go, the more colors there are. So if I go to 8-bit and I change this to 32-bit, this is like more colors than you can possibly ever imagine. So when I hit this, it goes crazy and just goes to a solid color, but then I can go back to here, and then I can crank this boost light down and create a very similar effect that is nice and smooth. Look how smooth that area is there. Okay. Now some effects do not work with 32-bit. Like some effects are only 8-bit. Don't worry about it. Everything in this one will work. There's a couple things that do say, not supported or not recommended, but whatever, it works. We have a circle here. Again, this is something artistically we could leave the circle on there, or we can change it to none and it'll get rid of the circle, and now we just have our glowing stuff. Now this looks okay, but it's definitely not as hologram looking as we would like it to be. A hologram typically, if you're not familiar with the technology, it shines light up onto a bunch of misting particles, and that's how holograms work. Like there has to be something for it to project on. It's like basically a little projector. So what we can do, let me lower this a little bit there. There we go. What I can do is go down to fractal noise, and I can enable fractal noise. And what this will do is it'll create this kind of noisy pattern on top of it. And when I hit play, you can see how it's kind of moving a little bit. Now the idea with this is because it's a hologram and because there's a hot light source underneath, typically, that's shining upwards, I'd like to have these fractal noise kind of moving upward. So if I go to my Y speed here, I can change that. And this is going to be, I think, backwards. If I go to -2, it goes up. Okay, so you can kind of see it moving up a little bit, right? A little bit. I'll go to -5 just so you can see a little bit more. But you can definitely see how it now feels like it's moving up. Now shine is something you could use not just for holograms, but pretty much anything. If you had a window and you wanted the light to look like it's shining through the window, you could use that. If you had a lamp and you wanted it to look like it's shining, you could use that. Okay, so to most of our items, we could add this inside there. So even your Angry Bird one, which is kind of why I'm showing this now too, you could add shine to different elements to help it kind of be a little bit more cleaned up, a little bit more nice looking. Okay, so that gets us a pretty decent setup here. Okay, now I'm going to change a couple things. One of them, right now, the noise type is set to 2D. So what's happening is, imagine a flat piece of paper like this with just a picture of that fractal on here. That's what we're seeing. So there isn't any depth to it. There's not any parallax or anything. So if I choose 3D light with parallax, what this does is it actually creates several layers of this smoke moving around, and so then it looks like it's actually a 3D light versus this paper light. So now when we hit play, it's subtle, but there is a slight difference in how the smoke is coming up. Okay. You can also change the kind of light. You don't have to worry about all the stuff there. You can play with the opacity of the effect here. You can play with the complexity of it. Okay. Most of the stuff is pretty sweet, where you can just click and drag sliders and see what they do. Okay, so I'm not going to go through every single one. That's good there. Anything else I want to change? Yes, colorize. So under colorize, right now this is a 3 color gradient, and that's how we're getting the color from for this thing. So white is the hottest, and then orangey, and then red, and that's how we're getting our 3 colors. So you can pick different colors here. So I can go to, let's say this, and I went to this blue, and then I go to this color, and I go to like this medium blue, and then for this color I go to more of a darker blue. Okay, so now there's my hologram color. You could also go to where it has the colorize and choose from any one of these. These are the default set or the presets for it. So you can make it a 5-color gradient if you want. You can pick, let's say, fire. You can pick Mars. Okay, chemistry. And usually they're good starting points, if anything. Like I think I started mine with spirit, and then I modified it. No, because mine's a 5-star or a 5-color. So I think I did enlightenment. That was what it was. I did enlightenment. Okay, so you can play with those and just see which one you like the best. Now I do want to do something different on here. So if you look at my hologram, it's pretty straightforward. It's just this cone, right? There's no change to it at all. So what I want to do is I want to vary what that shine is looking like throughout the entire thing. We have this noise pattern going up, but this still is a bit too clean. So let me turn this off for a second so we can take a look at this. This shape here is a solid color. That solid color is what's making it emit perfectly from that one spot. So if I take that solid color and I change it to a variation of color, I will get basically like streaks that will come out as opposed to just this weird looking cone. Okay. So I'm going to go to my shine hollow. I'm going to go to effect noise, and I'm going to add turbulent noise to it. Okay. Now, once I do that, if you look at the order of things, it's adding the shine in, and then afterwards it's adding the turbulent noise. What I want to do is add the noise first, so I get the variations, and then add the shine on top of it. So I'm just going to swap these like that, and instantly you can see the difference. Now we have more of a streak pattern going right here. I'll do the before, and then the after, and you can definitely see there's a huge difference in what we're seeing. Okay, so we want noise first. That way this actually looks like this, okay? So as it streaks out, it's coming out of these whiter areas more than the darker areas. And then just so you can see what changes I'm making to this, the fractal type, again, here's a bunch of presets. You can go through and play with them if you want. Essentially what I need is just something with a lot of contrast that looks like a cool thing, okay? It doesn't matter. I'm just going to go to that one's fine. That's weird. Linear is fine. I'm going to take my contrast up and take my brightness up. All right, I actually don't like small bumps. That looks disgusting. There we go. Back to there. Because what I want to do is I want to have different variations like that. Okay, so I have these big white spots and I have these dark spots. So now when I turn shine on, now look at that. And that is pretty awesome. That's better than it was. I'm going to go back to basic. Basic was better. Okay. Now you can still play with these without that on, but just so you're aware, so you can see it, that's what I did. Complexity is the amount of detail in that noise pattern. So the bigger that number, the more complexity, the more different shapes you're going to get. All right. And then if I hit play, you'll see that these lines are pretty static. Again, not something that would actually happen in the real world. What would happen is that the streaks would be kind of moving too, right? That makes sense. So I'm going to go to evolution and I'm going to animate this. Now you could click a keyframe here, go up to the end of this animation and move it along, and that is 100% acceptable. Like, that's something you could do. Now that we are 10 weeks into class, holy cow, 10 weeks, we want to push our skills again further and further and further. So now that we're introducing more expression stuff, I'm going to alt-click on evolution, and I'm just going to type in the word time, okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to take that value and make it equal to whatever the time is. So if my time is 10 seconds, it'll be 10. If it's 20 seconds, it'll be 20. We'll find when I hit play that this is going to move way too slow. Like, that's incredibly slow. So if I go to that time value and I just multiply it times like 60, it'll go 60 times quicker. And that's what's awesome about this, is that value will always change. If I make my comp 7 years long, it'll play for 7 years if it had the memory for that. Okay, if I want to go faster, I type in 60. If I want to go faster more, I type in 120. I want to go faster more. Okay, so 120. All right, that's cool. Right, so now we're getting more of that effect of the shine on there. I think I want to take this contrast up a bit more. Take that down. There we go. Oh, look at that. That's cool. Oh, see, and then it goes away too much. That's way too much. Pull it back some. There we go. Nice dancing light is what we're looking for, if that makes any sense at all. Sweet. All right, that's cool. All right, so now we have our lens, our shine that's popping up. So now what I want to do is I want to take that and I want to be able to animate this thing so that it could open up and close, right? Just like a HoloLens would do. So I'm going to animate two different things on here. One of them, you could animate 50 different things to do the same thing. One of them, remember, is that source point. Okay, so if I'm thinking about how a hologram would work, is that basically light would start shining up from this thing. Okay, that's how it would work. So if I move this lens closer to this, it's kind of like flattening it out some. Okay, now it doesn't go away, it's just going to stay right there, but that could be a good way to start it off. It starts off pretty flat and then kind of focuses itself up. So I'm going to animate that feature coming in. So I'm going to go to the very beginning of this and set a keyframe on source point. And then I'm going to go up to, I don't know, like 2 seconds. Sorry. Yeah, 2 seconds is good. 2 seconds is good. Then I'm going to pull this down. And then we get that. Okay. And I'm just going to set my work area here and zoom in just so I can focus on just this transition of it opening so we can see what it looks like. That's way too slow. Let's pull this in more. So let's go to 1 second for that opening. Nope. And let's go to easy ease this. There we go. All right, that's good. Okay, so that's quick enough. I can always adjust it. The other things that I can adjust is the ray length and the boost light. Those are two things that are going to affect what this thing looks like. So I'm going to go to my second keyframe and just set keyframes for each of these. I'm going to rewind it and then just reset these back to 0. Okay, so now there's nothing there, and then I hit play and then it comes up. Okay, so that looks pretty sweet. There's also a shimmer, which I forgot about. You can add this to it and it'll add kind of like glimmery type things to it. Yeah, that's cool. So you can kind of see the shimmery type stuff happening at the top. Okay. Now at the very, very beginning of this, this is what we're left with. And that looks, again, like disgusting. We don't want that. So I'm just going to animate a opacity, not a opacity. I'm going to animate an opacity and pull that down to 0. So the opacity for this layer is going to go from 0 to 100, while the source point goes down and while the boost light and the ray length go up. Okay? So that looks pretty convincing as it's just like coming out of nowhere. Alright, that looks cool. Alright, I'm satisfied with that for the moment at least. Cool, so that gives us the starting point of this. The next point I'd want to do is I want to be able to control it going away, like disappearing. So if I take all these keyframes and I just copy them, I go down to wherever, it doesn't matter at this point, and I paste it. I can right click, keyframe assistant, and time reverse. And then I have to move the opacity keyframes to the end. Okay? So what time reverse does is it takes those keyframes, if you had 50 of them, and it would literally just reverse the keyframes so that they're on the other side. So that makes your job a lot easier. You don't have to just move everything. You can just time reverse it. So now what we should have is roughly 4.5 seconds of this thing coming out, doing its thing, and then it going away. I think I want that opacity just be up a little bit more. Make sure I went down to 0. Yep, okay. All right, that'll work. Okay. All right, now another thing, go ahead.
No, you can go. I was just going to ask, like, is the specific requirement for this assignment just that we animate something existing, like CGI or whatever?
I want you to use the plugins for this, so I want you to use to basically create a hologram. I'm going to give you the geometry so that you can use that, but if you have another way to get geometry or you have something else, we can play with that too.
Okay, so just, but like, what we should focus on is we're doing something with a hologram.
Right, something with a hologram and incorporating it into a video. Okay. Now the good thing about this one is because I have that hammer, the screen, we're going to replace the screen with like blank stuff, and then as she's typing, if she wants to release her video to the class, or I have my own video I recorded, either way, you can replace the screen with that same image. Okay. Cool. All right. So now what I want to do is add in another effect. So I'm going to add a new solid. The colors don't matter in this case. Oh, just something to point out too on this one. Had I gone with a different colored solid, like had I chosen a black solid for this, you'll see that the effect doesn't change at all. Okay, because of that noise that's on here, it overrides it. If I didn't have the noise, that effect would go away. Okay, so just be aware of that. Until you add the noise, it's not there because it needs to have some sort of brightness in order for it to work. All right, so now back to this thing. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to add basically like these little particles kind of like floating up into that stream. So I'm going to, again, use effects. I'm going to use RG trap code, and I'm going to use particular. This is another one. So shine is one that's used like all over the industry, and then particular is used all over the industry. And the whole point of these is that it basically saved us a buttload of time. So let me hide my hologram for a second. So just like the HoloLens or the hologram effect, everyone hears that, right? Okay.
No, you're
All right.
well, Sean can hear it. Crossing towards the 15,000.
Right, we have not. All right, so particular, there's a dot, and that dot emits particles. It shoots particles out of it. So what we want to do is put the dot in one point at the bottom of the HoloLens and have the dots float upwards, okay? So if I rewind this and hit play, you'll see them kind of just spreading out like that. Now by default, there is no gravity to this, so they literally will just kind of expand outward forever. So I'm going to go to physics, which is where gravity exists, and I'm going to adjust my gravity. So if I go this way with gravity, you see it goes down. If I go this way with gravity, guess what happens? It goes up. Cool. All right, so something like that, if I hit play, it's pretty close to what we already want. I just need to adjust that. Was that you, Meg? The high-pitched squeal? All right, so that's getting closer. Let's go to maybe -80. Nope, less, -60. All right, so that's getting better. All right, so -60 is a good amount of time for that to happen. If I go to air, I can take the air resistance up a little bit, and it'll kind of bunch them and make them move a bit slower as they're moving up. So I could basically play with the gravity this way and the air that way to create a nice effect of it moving up slowly. The idea here is we don't want them to shoot up because that doesn't make sense. This is more like dust particles that just happen to be floating in the air with the hologram. There we go. So that's as fast as they're moving right now. I can also take my physics time factor down, and what that will do is it will make them go slower. Okay, that's too slow. Like 0.8 is probably a good number. There we go. Okay. With everything that I ever show, there's going to be tweaking involved, so just be aware that I'm not going to play with it as much as to get it to that end stage. I'm going to add a little bit of turbulence to this. Effect size, let's say 5. Oops. Yep. Let's say 20, and then effect position there. So what this turbulence is going to do is it's going to affect the size of each particle. So they'll randomly have these different sizes in there. So you can see how they get smaller and bigger. So that's going to be a nice little effect. And they'll also adjust their position. Where'd it go? Right here. There we go. So that they're kind of moving in a more like wavy kind of pattern, like if there's dust moving around. Alright, so that's kind of neat. Now this isn't, we're looking at it by itself. It's going to be mixed into the other stuff, so keep in mind that it won't be as obvious now of what's happening. So we have to go a little bit further than what we should do in order to see any of this stuff work. What else? Let's go to the particle itself. It has a lifespan. So let's pretend that this is a huge scene and this hologram is this big and our scene is that big. We don't want these particles flying up way above where we want the hologram to be. So we can take this lifespan to like 1, and what it would do is only go up 1 second. Each particle lives for 1 second and then just dies off. It's pretty sad. 3 is actually perfect for this. It just works out great. Here's different kinds of particles. So if you remember some of the videos we watched where there was some kind of like smoke or fire or different things, they would use this kind of thing with different ones of these to create that stuff. Okay, like cloudlet looks like little clouds and they actually like blend together, so it's kind of a neat way to do it. For what we're doing, sphere is going to work fine. We can adjust the feathering on it. Okay, and that's pretty much all we need. I'm going to take the size random up a little bit more. I'm going to take the opacity random up so that we have different values. And I'm going to take the color and give it whatever color my hologram was. I want to go a lighter version of that. So if I went with a blue hologram, I want to go with a light blue color here. And by default, not by default, by our opacity slider, we have different values already. So you can see some of these are darker, some of these are brighter. But I can still randomize the color some if I just want to introduce maybe a little bit of variation into that mix. Okay. What else? Blending. Yep, I think that should be good. Sweet. All right, so there's our particles. So now we put this on top of the hologram. And that's like way too small. Like, look at super tiny. And I want to go to emitter. And I'm going to change my emitter. I said that it comes from a tiny point. So that's what the emitter type right now is, point. If I change this to sphere, it'll actually come out of a sphere in kind of this bigger shape. It's way too big. So I'm going to scale it down. Emitter size right here. And I can change the XYZ individually. So like the Y, which is up and down, I don't want that to be as big. So I'm going to go with, let's say, 1. Oops. Yes, yes, yes. There we go. Okay, and then I'll change the Z to 250 and this one to 250. There we go. Nice. Okay. And then what I want to do is I can change the mode for this to an add. Or a screen. Oops, that's not screen. Oh, lighting looks good. You can play with different ones to see which one you like best. I may have to pre-compose this. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's changing too much. Alright, let me pre-compose this first. So I'm going to pre-compose and call this particles. Move everything together. And remember, pre-composing, all that does is basically like lock those settings into it. So now I do overlay. I do add. Yeah, it's about the same. Okay. I can also take my opacity down, which I think I want to do. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. Alright, so now what I want to do is just time this out. Let me undo my pre-composing because I didn't actually need it. There we go. I'll set this back to add. I'll set the opacity down like that. And then I can time this out much easier. So if I go to my particular, there's only one thing I need to animate, which is these particles per second. That's how many particles are shooting out. So it's going to start off at 0. And if we look at where these keyframes are, oops, I didn't set a keyframe at the beginning. There we go. I'm going to pull it up to 100. I'm going to go to the end here. I will say 100 there and then 0 there. Now I'll need to adjust that. It's not going to be perfect. Okay, because the particles start like afterwards. Okay, because what happens is they're basically being born right when they start being emitted, and it takes them some time to get up in the mix. I want them to already kind of be there. Okay, so if I pull this in a little bit more so that the particles start emitting sooner, what I'll see is that they'll timed out just a bit better so that I can see them just a bit earlier. There we go, that's good. And then the same thing here at the end. This goes away and there's still particles kind of sitting there, and that looks kind of odd. So I'm actually going to take the particles and have them be a little bit sooner on when they die off or stop emitting. So let's go and bring that in. There we go. That's better. And make it a little bit more vibrant so we can see those better. Sweet. I think just a tiny bit. There we go. All right, so that's sufficient for now. All right, now there's one more thing that I want to add to this, which is kind of these, if you've seen Star Wars, I'm sure, the little lines that would come up inside there, kind of like it's grainy a little bit. So I'm going to go to a new composition for that. And I'm just going to create a line. Doot, doot, like that. Okay, so there's my line. I'm going to give it a stroke. And then I'm just going to animate the position of it. Let me just move the pivot here. There we go. So I'm going to keyframe this here, go up to, let's say, 4 seconds. Move it way up there. And then it goes like that. That's great, isn't it? Okay. So I'm going to pre-compose this because basically I want to lock that effect in so it's like a flattened out version. So this is just a single stroke. Okay, so there's one stroke moving up like that. Glorious. I'm going to duplicate it, and I want to offset the animation. I want this one to start later than the first one. So I'm going to right click on it and go to time and enable timer mapping. And what this allows me to do is take these two keyframes and just move them. So I grab those both of those keyframes and move them, and what's going to happen is that one's going to be offset a little bit. So there's one. Oops, let me move this over. There we go. Yeah, that's not the effect I want. Hold on. I'm going to go back before I did that. Alright, I'm just going to leave it like this. That's fine. Let's leave it like that. Alright. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm just going to change this here. There we go. So now I get one, and then the other one goes a little bit faster. Okay? Now what I want to do is I want to loop that effect so it constantly happens. I could animate it and animate it and animate it, but that's a stupid way to do it. So I'm going to alt-click on here, and if you remember from one of our lectures, we did this loop out expression. Everything's lowercase except for the O and out, and then you do parentheses. And what that's going to do is it's going to loop that animation. Okay, so now when I hit play, you'll see there's one bar, there's the second bar going quick, and then here's the second bar going quick, and the other bar going slow, and then there's the second one. Okay, so we get this really neat effect of having these lines come up. The more lines I duplicate in here, and then I just move these keyframes, I could add extra lines in there too. I could change their color, change their opacity, whatever it is. Okay, so that's awesome. Now what I want to do is I want to add an adjustment layer, and I want to go to distort, and I want to go to turbulent displace. Okay, and what this does is it distorts the layers underneath it, right? Because I'm on an adjustment layer and I added that effect, so everything underneath it will get distorted. So now we'll get these like wavy lines. Again, you can play with the amounts, you can play with the sizes. The bigger the size, the less movement there is in there. Okay, so you can go with something like that. You can go with less distortion, more distortion. It's creepy. Remember, the idea with this is that we have, these lines that would move up and down this thing. Okay, so now I'm going to drop that into my hologram. So if I go to my comp 1, which should have been named horizontal lines. There we go. This will go down in here, and then this will go into here. Perfect. And then what I'm going to do is put this on a track mat with my shine halo. Okay, so I need to duplicate the shine and then use this as a track mat. And so now you'll see that it follows that path, right? So it's not over here or over there, it's just right inside those bars. And then when those bars disappear, the lines disappear too. Okay? And then if I need more lines, I can just come into here. I can grab all of my keyframes and scoot them closer. There we go. Now we come back to this. Sweet. I can also go to each one of these and change maybe their thickness. Maybe that one's a little bit thinner. This one's a little bit thicker. No, 12 seems too much, right? Let's go to 2. And then that one's 9. That might work. Yeah, that's good. Nope, I don't see the 2. The 2 seems to be disappeared. So let's go with 6 on that one. Okay, now you can do other effects too. On that same effect where I have these wiggly lines, I could add a bulge or a spherize, and what that would do is it would push it out and make it more rounded so that it felt like as it went up the stream that it would actually get like kind of roundy more towards the front of this. Just to show that, I go back to distort on the adjustment layer. I go to magnify will work. Here, if you look at the little triangle, this is an 8-bit effect on a 32-bit thing. Remember, we clicked the 32-bit, so everything is 32-bit. It'll still work, it's just letting you know. Alright, so somewhere about here, and magnification is there, and size is there. So let's see if that does anything. Yeah, that's cool. The magnification might be up a bit much. Let's crank that down some. Alright, that's cool. And then we don't have to adjust anything here, it'll just follow in. So you'll see that it's going to follow the contour of it a bit more, where it feels like now maybe it's kind of circular. And then it goes away. Sweet. Alright, so that's going to be the first part of this. Then I will show in another day, at another lecture, I will show putting these things together, putting the screen replacement and everything else. Okay? So once you get done with the Angry Birds, you can start on this one.